Progressive Skills in English, Level 1 Coursebook.
Welcome to episode 6. Let's go to some more insights about low-tech food preservation. This is the reading section. Now we have a photograph on the screen. Let's check it together. What can you see? We can see some fruits which are not preserved well, so that they got spoiled, as you can see. Maybe they are decayed or they're about to lose their freshness. Why that? Because of two things. Maybe because of dirty water they're in, or they are not preserved well. Now let's have the first vocabulary box in this episode, and you will have it on the screen. Let's read it together. Can, noun. Canning, noun. Crop, noun. Freezer, noun. Pest, noun. Preserve, verb. Rack, noun. Storage, noun. Tight, adjective. Yield, noun. Make sure that you know the meaning of the words in the vocabulary box so that we can use them in reading the text that we have now. Watch the text on the screen and follow the reading with me. Can you preserve food in a low-tech way? Yes, you can. The problem? In West Africa, most countries can grow enough food to feed their whole population. The crops grow well and the yield can be very high, but many areas do not have electricity, so there are no fridges or freezers. As the temperature rises in summer, stored food starts to go bad. Up to 60% of the crops are lost. The lack of storage causes extra problems. Firstly, because the farmers can't store extra crops, they don't plant extra crops. Each farm only produces enough food for a small number of people. Secondly, they don't pick the crops until they are ready to eat them or sell them. So many of these crops die in the fields. Finally, all the crops become available in the markets at the same time, so the price of each one is very low. The solution? There is a simple solution to the storage of vegetables and fruit. It's called canning. This low-tech solution wasn't known in West Africa until very recently. The process doesn't need electricity or refrigeration. It only requires a wood fire and some glass jars with tight-fitting lids. The solution had three main benefits. Firstly, the glass jars keep the food fresh for months or even years. Secondly, they protect the food from pests and bacteria. Finally, the system is sustainable because the people can use the jars again and again. The history of canning. Canning was invented in the late 18th century in France. Napoleon, the Emperor of France, was worried about feeding his soldiers, so he offered a prize for a way to preserve food. In 1790, a man called Nicolas Appert had the idea of keeping food in bottles. He experimented for 15 years, but the food always went bad. He finally realized that you had to heat the food. In 1806, Appert got the prize, but bottling food wasn't a perfect solution because glass breaks easily. 4 years later, a man called Peter Durand developed a way of sealing food in tin cans. So the process became known as canning, and the cans are used today in low-tech solutions. How does home canning work? The food is put into glass jars. The jars are sealed with tight-fitting lids. Then the jars are placed in a rack. The rack stops the jars from knocking together and breaking during the next part of the process. The rack is put into a pot of water, and the pot is covered. After that, the water is boiled for a particular period of time. The jars and the lids expand during boiling, and some air escapes from the jars. When the jars cool, the lids are pulled tightly onto the jars, and there is a vacuum above the food. Sources include http://moringacommunity.org. This is our work, foodpreservation.html. Now, after reading the texts together, let's try to answer some question that shows that you know or understand where the topic sentences are as well as the comprehension of the whole text. Let's have some questions on the screen. What are some good things for farmers in West Africa? Going back to the text, you will see that they can have large number of types of food crops and vast areas. What are some problems for farmers in the area? That they cannot plant food for a large group of people because it goes bad easily. What is the low-tech solution to their problems? It's putting and keeping food in jars. How does it solve the problem? Because by keeping food into jars, it helps to keep the food for a longer time. Now you will see a diagram that is numbered on the screen. Let's check every step. 1. The food is put into glass jars. 2. The jars are sealed with tight fitting lids. 3. The jars are placed in a rack. 4. The rack is put into a pot of water. And 5. When the jars cool, the lids are pulled tightly onto the jars and there is a vacuum about the food. Now let's go to page number 148 to do the coming two exercises, the second and the third. You will have this box or this table in front of you on the screen. What kind of power does each machine and tool in exercise 1 use? Put each one into one or more of the groups below. Human power, like a blow, a can opener. Animal power, like a windmill, for example. Electricity, like a mobile phone and a factory robot, a laptop, a fridge. Oil or petrol, a jet plane. And the natural, like water, wind, and sun, may be a windmill. Now let's go to exercise 5 on page 148, and this time I will read the question and I will let you understand what are you required to do in the question, but you will provide the answers by yourselves. What can you remember about each of the following? What problem did each piece of technology solve? How did it solve the problem? A. The play pump in South Africa. Remember, it is related to water. Canning. Remember, it is related to food. CAD or CAD. You will remember and you will search. Electricity supply, and you will check. Please go through the theme and check and answer the 3 questions in the above question instructions. Now let's go to extra activities. Page 94 in the workbook, exercise number 1, you will be having some pictures on the screen for some food items. Let's comment on them. Refrigeration. The most important advantage for this is that it can keep food for a longer time, safe and eatable. Microwave technology. You can heat whatever you want to heat with no kind of any harm. Kitchen appliances are important for the housewife to help her doing all the food requirements without kind of effort. Food packaging, very important because it keeps the food clean so that it can be used in a safe way. Let's go to page number 95 in the workbook and let's check 2 columns of words in which we will match the vowels together. Fruit, it can go with cool. Market, with lost. Fresh, with health. Oven, with more or not.